By praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we send our peace and blessings upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, this is the second lesson of the 4-part series, the Halal Standard. Where last week we spoke about the Halal celebrations. This week we're going to be speaking about Halal consumption, and then we've also got Halal dress code and Halal income, risky rizq, that's happening inshallah over the next 2 weeks as well. So this is the Halal Standard over the 4 weeks that we've got prepared here at the UMA Center, delivered by all of the Mashaykh in the UMA Center. And inshallah today I am also joined by dear brother Naji, who's going to be speaking a bit more about the technical aspects of halal, more specifically, regarding chicken and whatnot. I've been asked multiple times before this lesson, will I be speaking about chicken? I mean, yeah, the photo that you saw online would have been a chicken, right? So we're gonna talk about it inshallah. But we're also going to speak about it in a general sense. What is halal? What's required? And some aspects associated with halal bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Much of the words that I'm going to be saying today is derived from the work of Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him, from his very famous book Ihya Ulumuddin, when he speaks about halal. So the very first thing that we want to speak about is the importance of halal and the virtues of halal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, كُلُوا مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا. It says, eat from the tayyibat. And that's the tafsir of that is what is halal. Eat from the tayyibat, from what is pure, what is halal. وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا. And do righteous actions. Now notice how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says eat first before He speaks about your righteous actions. Now your righteous actions, it's including your prayers, your fasting, it's including your adhkar, it's including all of the actions that you do to get closer to Allah, to follow His commandments, to stay away from the prohibitions, right? All of these are actions. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the importance, He brings about the command for you to eat what is pure first, and then He speaks about your actions. So again, this brings about and it draws your attention to the gravity of the matter about eating halal. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith, طَلَبُ الْحَلَالِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim. That seeking what is halal is compulsory upon every Muslim. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim. Seeking knowledge is compulsory upon all Muslims. Some of the scholars said that we understand the both of these ahadith by merging the two. And they say that you understand it with the following meaning. It is compulsory for you to learn what is required for you to attain the halal and what is halal in terms of consumption. And that is what's compulsory. So you need to have the knowledge of what is halal and haram. You need to have the knowledge of how to attain what is halal and what's haram, right? Or to stay away from what's haram. And so this is the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ in regards to the halal. Now, it was narrated that one of the companions radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, a Prophet of Allah, ask Allah that He makes my dua accepted. So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say no to him. He gave him conditions. And he says to him, أَطِبْ طَعْمَتَكَ تُسْتَجَبْ دَعْوَتَكَ. He says that if you are to maintain what is halal in what you consume, then your dua will be accepted. So it's a condition for our dua to be accepted that what we consume and what we eat and what we enter in our stomach is considered halal. طيب نعم. One of the statements that Imam al-Ghazali mentions, and I highlighted this, and I thought this is a really powerful statement. He says that the example of food in regards to our religion is like the foundations of a building. He says, if the foundations are solid, then the building will stay up and it will be erected. And if the foundations are weak, then the building will fall. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, أَفَمَنْ أَسَّسَ بُنْيَانَهُ عَلَى تَقْوَى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Speaking about the one who builds the foundation that he has for himself on the God consciousness and being wary and knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in specific here, he says that the food that one consumes is like the foundation for us, right? Because there's no point in consuming what is haram but then going and praying, right? There is one of the ahadith which is weak, yani. However, the meaning of it is correct. It's that the one who eats what is haram, لا يقبل منه صرف ولا عدل, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept what is sarf and adl. What's that? It's the obligatory actions and the sunnah actions that one does. So it's very important that one consumes what is halal, because that is the foundation for everything that follows. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the ayah that I mentioned previously, He speaks about food first, then He speaks about the actions. It is narrated that Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu once he drank from the milk that his slave brought forward to him. So his slave came with some milk and he gave it to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he drank it. Didn't ask him. He just drank it. Then after he drank it, he asked him, where did you get this milk from? He says, a group of people asked me to do some fortune telling. And I did it, and then they paid me the milk. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu grabbed his finger and he shoved it down his throat so he can start to vomit all of that milk that he consumed. And the one who narrates the hadith, he says that I felt like Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was going to die because of how hard he was trying to vomit all of that food. Then the news, it reached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they told him about Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he says that Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, did you not know that this man's stomach will not accept anything except what is halal? So the companions radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they took it very importantly, the whole concept of consuming what is halal. And any time, and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was not the only one, but because of the shortness of time, I'm only going to mention his story. But there's many other companions who would do something similar if they found themselves in a situation where they might have consumed something which is haram, that would remove it from their stomach. Now let's speak about the actual consumption itself. When we're speaking about what is permissible or not permissible to eat, we break it down into the following categories. And the first one is what comes from the earth. And this is like the rocks and the soil and dust and all of these things, right? That's permissible to eat. Now you might be thinking to myself, why on earth would we even be speaking about something like that? Who even eats dust? Who even eats sand? Who even eats soil? Right? The reason why Imam al-Ghazali mentions this, and he says that the point of even mentioning this is, if you are outside somewhere and you want to eat, right? Back then they never had everything fancy on tables, right? And you're outside somewhere and you want to eat, and then some soil or some dust actually ends up on the food that you're going to eat, and you consume it. It's permissible. It's not like the dust is haram. It's not like you have to remove it out of your body. That's the whole point of him mentioning this. The second type is an-nabatat, which is what we regard as plants and vegetation. From the vegetation, everything is halal except what? Either one, removes your intellect, or two, it poisons you. So it brings harm to you. So nabatat, the vegetation, the vegetarians out there, not much to worry about. Just stay away from what is impermissible in regards to the, like for example, there's some sort of mushroom that one can eat. It's poisonous, right? It can kill you. Don't eat that. Very clear, right? I mean, it's self-evident you don't eat something that's poisonous. But also there's other things like nutmeg. I think that's what it's called, right? The one that makes you high and gives you, the qualities of what alcohol is like. So one also needs to stay away from that. So in regards to vegetation, most of it is halal except for what removes the intellect. By extension as well, all of the weed and everything that comes like that. And also what is poisonous. As for the third category, which is what we regard as al-hayawan, the animals. Now the animals, they are broken down into two categories. al-ma'kulat, which is what is consumed, what is eaten, وغير المأكولات, and that which is not consumed and not eaten, right? And from within that, you break them down into three other categories, right? You can say that there is animals of the sky, so the birds. Then you've got the animals of the land, such as, give me examples, like goat, sheep, cows, all of these animals, right? Then you've got the animals of the sea that happen to live in the sea. And so those are the three categories of animals. I'm not going to go into the full detail of what is permissible, not permissible in regards to that. But we're going to recite one ayah in the Quran that highlights to us what is permissible, what isn't permissible, I should say, from the animals. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُ وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ والمنخنقة والموقوذة والمتردية والنطيحة وما أكل السبع إلا ما ذكيتم وما ذبح على النصب وأن تستقسموا بالأزلام. And the ayah continues in Surah Al-Ma'idah. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about here, which is impermissible, is carrion, which is dead animals. Consuming a dead animal, like a roadkill, that's impermissible, that's haram. So it might be that this animal is permissible to eat intrinsically, like a chicken, like a cow, but because it was found dead, it becomes impermissible to eat, right? Because it did not die because of slaughter. It has to be slaughtered for it to be eaten. If it was dead, you're not allowed to eat it. The second one is blood. And when we say blood, the tafsir of that is ad-dam al-masfuh, as mentioned in another ayah, which is the gushing blood. So when you slaughter an animal, there's blood that gushes out. That's impermissible to eat, right? As for the blood that may remain after draining the blood from the animal and giving it time for all the blood to flush out, the blood that remains within the animal, that's permissible, that's fine. As for the blood that gushes out, that's impermissible to eat. Pork, and this is ma'lumun min ad-dini bid-darura. Every single person knows that pork is impermissible to eat and the flesh of swine is impermissible to eat in Islam. Animals dedicated to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who slaughter an animal for the sake of someone else, for the sake of another God, for the sake of, whatever it is, right? When you slaughter an animal, you slaughter it saying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahu Akbar, right? Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. In the name of Allah, Allah is the greatest, and then you slaughter the animal. Now, it probably doesn't happen as much today in the Western world, but it certainly does happen around the world, right? When they slaughter animals for an idol, for example, or they slaughter an animal, for whatever shirki, celebration or anything like that. Strangled to death, al-munkhaniqah, and this we're probably going to come back to later on, inshallah. So in regards to animals that are strangled to death, this happens a lot for those who go hunting and they put traps, right? I think it's illegal to a certain extent here in Australia, but for those who use traps to hunt an animal, this trap is used so they can trap the leg. Great, you've got the animal trapped in the leg, like a wild animal, a deer or something. But what if the animal slipped, fell on its head, and then somehow it got snagged by the neck? It got pulled up into the tree, snagged by the neck. It's gonna get choked. That animal is then considered as al-munkhaniqah, which means it's a dead animal because of choking. That's impermissible to eat. It's impermissible to eat. Hit or beaten to death. This is another scenario that might happen here in Australia in regards to cattle, where animals are hit or beaten to death. Here it's one blow with a specific type of gun. I'll get Najib to speak about that later. But any animal that's hit or beaten to death is impermissible to eat. It must be slaughtered. Again, for us as Muslims, it must be slaughtered. Even with the slaughter in the specific conditions. But I'm not going to go into that. Okay. Dead through fatal fall, which is an animal that, for example, it's what do they call it? Mountain goats, right? Mountain goats are pretty good at scaling mountains. They're called mountain goats, right? So they're able to scale the mountain pretty well. But sometimes you might see them stumble and they're just going to go down the mountain. What's going to happen? By the time they hit the end, they're going to fall and they're going to just die, right? So in that scenario, that's regarded as a dead animal because it fell from a height, and that height is the reason why it died. and so we regard it as impermissible to eat. Half eaten by wild beasts, and that is when you find an animal, for example, a lion is hunting a deer, and the lion's got the deer's neck in his mouth and he's chewing, and you come around, the lion jumps away, and then can you eat the animal there? No, you can't. It's a dead animal. Khalas. All right. So except what is slaughtered before death. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا مَا ذَكَّيْتُمْ, except what is slaughtered before death. If an animal is slaughtered after death, it's not considered as permissible or pure to eat. Now the only exception to that rule is when you are hunting, right? And there's difference of opinion on whether you have to say Bismillah or not when you release the arrow. For us today, we probably don't release the arrow. We're probably going to have a gun in our hands. We're going to be looking through the scope, pointing it at an animal. Say Bismillah, squeeze the trigger, bullet comes out, hits the animal. Okay, most of the time what you're aiming for is the shoulder. So that way the animal can drop, it's not going to run away. You're not going to get it into the guts, and that way the guts are flying around or whatever it is. Well, that's not what we're aiming for. We're trying to stop the movement. So get it into the shoulder, it comes down. You get to the animal because obviously a couple of 100 meters away. By the time you get there, sometimes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes it's a bit more, right? You get to the animal, it's tired, whatever it is, but it's still alive. You slaughter it. Ya salam, perfect. But what if you came and you got to the animal, but it's dead? In this scenario, we say that it's permissible to slaughter the animal immediately and then eat it. Because with the hunting, and that's the only exception to the rule, and that's only for hunting. And even then, there's very specific conditions. If you got to the animal, but you lost sight of it, and some other animal came and probably hit it, or took a chunk out of it, can you eat it? No, you can't. Or you found that this animal fell into a well after your shot, and then it ran away, it fell into a well, and in the well there's water. You found the animal dead. Now you are in doubt. Is the animal dead because of my shot with the arrow, with the bullet? Or is the animal dead because it fell into the well and it drowned? Which one is it? Because I'm in doubt, I don't eat. It becomes impermissible, right? So there's heaps more scenarios that we can speak about. Again, I'm not here to speak about the hunting per se. Inshallah, one day I would love to do a series about hunting. But the idea is, there's very specific conditions for one to accept for one to consume what is halal in regards to wild animals and also cultivated animals. Now let's speak about a few levels of what is regarded as halal. Now, the very first one is which everyone must refrain from eating. And this one is regarded where the one who consumes this food is a fasiq, he's a sinner. And this is, for example, one who needs to now stay away from pork, stay away from eating something that was slaughtered incorrectly or not slaughtered at all, right? All of this is regarded as not halal. This is the first level. And everyone needs to follow this as Muslims. The second level, which is a higher level, it's what Imam al-Ghazali describes as wara'u salihin. And this is what could be regarded as haram. And he gives the example and he says, there's two parts to it. مَا يُكْرَهُ اجْتِنَابُهُ, which is disliked for you to stay away from. And this is the one who has waswas in his mind. The reason being is because, for example, there's hunting occurring, but you know that there's a farmer somewhere who lost a couple of deers on his sheep, on his land, and those deer, they ran away. Those deers belong to him. But then you go out into a nearby paddock somewhere, and you go to like some nearby forest, and you think to yourself with the waswas in your mind, I don't want to go hunting and I don't want to go and shoot a deer because I fear that I'm going to shoot a deer that belongs to that farmer and it doesn't belong to me. That's waswas, right? That's too much. And we regard as, okay, look, put that aside, go ahead and do hunting. But you can't sit there and stop eating for minor things like this, right? And things that you cannot, are way beyond your control. Then you've got the other one, which is liked. It's mustahab for you to stay away from. And which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says in a hadith, دَعْ مَا يَرِيبُكَ إِلَى مَا لَا يَرِيبُكَ. Leave for what you have doubt in, for something that you do not have doubt in. And this one is for the example that I gave previously, and that is when you are hunting. No, not the example that I gave previously. This is slightly different, slightly less. When you are hunting, let's just say you shoot an animal and you lose sight of the animal. Then you get to the animal and you don't see any other marks on the animal except the mark of your arrow or the bullet that you have put into the animal. But it could have died because of some other act. It could have fell. It could have been hit by another animal with a horn, for example. And you got to it and you found it dead because you lost sight of it. So here, it is recommended not to eat the animal, although it is permissible to still eat it. Because in this scenario, there's no evidence to prove otherwise that the animal died from another reason, but you lost sight. And that little moment where you lost sight then has a bit of doubt. And because there's doubt, we leave what we have doubt for something that we don't have doubt. And this is what Imam al-Ghazali mentions as second level. And the third level he mentions is wara'ul muttaqeen, those who are God conscious and they're God fearing. And this is where they leave something even though it's regarded as halal for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the fear that it might have something which is haram. And this is it's not necessarily, the example that I'm going to give is not necessarily with consumption, but Imam al-Ghazali mentions when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he received some perfume from Bahrain for the Muslims. He did not know how much it weighed. It belongs to the Muslim. And when it came to him, he asked, I wish they actually told me how much this weighs. So his wife said to him, I can weigh. I know how to weigh. I can tell you how much it weighs. And then he paused and he thought, and he says, no, I want someone else. And the reason why he says, I want someone else is because he turns to his wife and he says, I fear that as you are weighing this perfume, you might, with your hands, rub your neck with that perfume, and now some parts of that perfume is coming on you, and it belongs to the Muslims. Right? And this is like wara'ul muttaqeen. Like you can't get away from it, right? Whoever's gonna weigh is gonna they're gonna touch it. So obviously some perfume is gonna get on their hand. But this is an extra level of precaution that Umar ibn al-Khattab would take when it comes to the halal. And then we have the last, which he calls wara'ul siddiqeen. And this is that they do not consume anything that previously may have had anything associated with it that is haram. So the person who bought the food, for example, the person who prepared the food, where they're eating, anything that is haram that's associated with it, they would not eat. And the only reason why they eat is only for them to have enough morsels in their stomach for them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do their worship. And this is so obviously they're leaving all of the other halal. Like it's halal for you to go and eat Cadbury Dairy Milk, right? Beautiful, love chocolate, right? Yeah, but do you need it so you can actually sustain yourself? Probably not. So wara'u siddiqeen is you leave that. You only eat what's required to keep you going, to keep your back straight, and so you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that we've spoken a great deal about these elements that are associated with halal, let's speak about the controversies. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, إِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّن وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّن. Indeed, halal is clear, and indeed, haram is clear. وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ. And in between them, there are matters that are doubtful. There's a grey area there. And the Prophet ﷺ continues to say that one needs to abstain from falling in the shubuhat. For indeed, the one who falls in the shubuhat is as though they have fallen in the haram. It's a doubt. There's a doubtful matter there. Don't, fall into these doubtful matters, because the one who falls in these doubtful matters is a slippery slope to fall into the haram, as the Prophet ﷺ says. In regards to halal, what's the most halal thing that anyone can get? And Imam al-Ghazali, he mentions the most halal thing that anyone can ever get is when it rains, you step outside, you with a bucket or with your mouth, you collect the water, and that's the most halal thing you can get. Why? Because no one's collecting it for you. So they're going to sell it to you. Or they're collecting it with a bucket that doesn't belong to them. Or whatever it is, there could be some sort of, association of something haram in regarding the action. So the most halal thing that anyone can do is step outside when it's raining, open their mouth, drink some water. Yes, halal. I'm not going to say the most haram thing, but it does mention something that's very clearly haram, is where there is no doubt in the impermissibility of eating such food. Like what? Like the consumption of pork, right? Like the consumption of alcohol. There is no doubt whatsoever in any person's mind that this is halal, right? Khalas, we all know that this is haram. Every single one of us knows that this is haram. As for what's in between, and this is where we have the mutashabihat. Now, in regards to that, specifically here in Australia, we have some issues in regards to chicken, even meat, right? Red meat as well. But chicken more so. There's a big problem. Now, there's a lot more that I want to speak about, the practicality in regards to this, but I'm going to bounce over to, inshallah, Brother Naji, where he's going to speak a bit more about the issues with chicken, what's happening around in Australia, and then we'll have a bit more of a conversation in regards to how to approach the matter. Do you want to turn on your microphone? Can I get one of the brothers to close that door? Jazakallah khair.
SubhanAllah, I get introduced for controversy. Alhamdulillah.
He's the halal manager. We always call him the haram manager, right?
Alhamdulillah, bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. SubhanAllah, the conversation we've been having lately in relation to halal and haram, what Sheikh's been discussing, it's been a recurring issue now for quite a substantial amount of time. It's a very contentious issue. And most people don't like to discuss it because most people don't want to hear it. Unfortunately, it's an issue that it affects us all, and people seem to take it not in a good way when we discuss it. Reason being, it affects the stomach. And what affects our stomachs makes us upset, unfortunately, subhanAllah. The issues we're discussing tonight in relation to halal and haram is we live in a Western country. So in a non-Muslim country where we live, there's always going to be contentious issues when it comes to our food consumption. Naturally, specific foods that Sheikh discussed are halal, and obviously we have foods that are non-halal, whether it be meat, desserts, chicken, anything that comes that's made has specific ingredients in it that need to be obviously checked and make sure that it suits the halal appetite. Unfortunately, the issue with chicken at the moment in Australia is becoming quite a large issue and a contentious issue. It's not the chicken itself that's the issue, it's the pre-stunning method of the chicken that's becoming an issue. Over the last 10 years, it's probably been now, there's been an introduction of a different type of stunning of chicken. So for people who don't know, in Australia, animals need to be stunned unless it's got a specific permit. They need to be stunned before they're slaughtered. What stunning does, it makes the animal unconscious. So visibly, it's a lot more, they say it's a lot more appeasing visually and a lot less harm to the animal as they stay in Australia. So that's one of the conditions that need to be met. I'll specifically discuss chicken because that's what Sheikh was alluding to. The poultry method in Australia, there's 3 different types of stunning. Non-stunned, electric water bath stunned, and something called cast stunning, which has been introduced probably in the last 10 years or so. Non-stunned is a very difficult procedure to do because the government in general discourages it. So animal welfare discourages it. You need a specific permit, and it's mostly applicable to the Jewish community for non-stunned products. In terms of stunning, electric stunning has been...
We can do the same as Muslims.
We can do the same.
But we don't have any abattoirs.
It's not that we don't have abattoirs. There is. It's very hard to get an abattoir that's approved without stunning because of the animal welfare. Plus, it makes the price of your product a lot more expensive than what you're currently paying now for your poultry. And us as Muslims, we consume a lot of poultry, and the price of poultry is a lot of people aren't willing to pay for that difference in the method. There has been, because of the condition in Australia, you need to stun, so there has been permissibility to allow specific methods of stunning. The most common used to be is electric water bath stunning. So where the animal gets dipped into this water that's electrified, the head will be dipped into the animal into the water as it comes out. It knocks out the animal unconscious for 30, 45 seconds, and then the animal comes back to life. In that 45 seconds, they usually slaughter it, whether it's hand slaughter, machine slaughter. The animal gets slaughtered and it gets deemed as halal as long as it fits within the guidelines as set when slaughtering. The contentious issue here is the cast stunning. What's happened, like I said, in the last 10 years, it's a little bit where there's a little bit of unawareness in relation to it, and there wasn't much common knowledge within the Muslim community in general. So there wasn't a lot of research done into it. In Australia, currently there is chicken that's cast stunned, that's been approved as halal and being advertised and marketed as halal. Unfortunately, around the world, internationally, through any of the Muslim standards, around the Islamic standards, cast stunning has not been approved anywhere, and there hasn't been any permissibility of that specific type of method. So the research has needed to be done in relation to that specific method of stunning, which we're currently doing at the moment. We believe that the chicken itself, once it goes through a method of cast stunning, the chicken is rendered dead before the knife hits the neck. And this is where the contentious issue is, where, as Sheikh discussed, it needs to be alive before the slaughter to allow it to be consumed as halal. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the brands of chicken in Australia now are starting to become cast stunned, which causes a bit of controversy. There is facilities that are capable of doing electric stun poultry that you currently probably buy, but the issues are when it starts to get downfed from those abattoirs down to the next distributor and then down to the retailer who we buy from. And this is where the system falls out of place in terms of halal. Currently, the gas stunning is approved as halal by specific people, and we're trying to figure out ways of working it out to make it suitable. If there is a possibility to be suitable for halal consumption, we've been working quite hard on it. Unfortunately, we had a bit of slowdown during COVID. And now for the last 12 months, we've been working quite substantial on it. And soon, inshallah, we'll have a result, we're hoping, in the next few weeks in relation to that specific method. What we can do in general as public is where the hard part comes into play. I believe it's everybody's responsibility as a Muslim consumer to be firstly aware of what the issues are. And secondly, how do we make sure as a community we maintain the integrity of our halal product that we consume and we feed our children. This is the most contentious issue at the moment. It's not a thing that I can do by myself or someone can do or organization can do. It's actually a community effort, because when we go and buy chicken or we need to research, we need to call, we need to speak to these specific abattoirs and put pressure, discuss, find out which are gas stunned, find out which are water bath stunned, make the effort to be able to do so proactively. When every single one of us, one voice is very difficult, but when the Muslim community comes together and puts pressure on these places, they have no choice but to try to work around a way to make it possible for it to be consumed as halal. Unfortunately, it's been a contentious issue that's been spoken about for a long time, and this is, people don't like to speak about it. And whenever I discuss it, even with my friends and family, subhanAllah, people get quite shy of talking about it because they don't want to know. A lot of people don't want to know because it affects our daily eating habits quite substantially. I don't want to scare anyone off today, and that's the whole point, is not to get too deep into it, inshallah, but we will be getting into it very shortly over the next few weeks, inshallah, and we'll be discussing it more in detail. But just know that there is an issue out there, and we need to work together to solve this current issue. And inshallah, we'll be discussing me and Sheikh today over the night, taking some questions in relation to it as well, and see what we can help with. But even me, myself personally, I'm finding it hard to find a suitable place to actually buy my chicken. And that's how hard I am. I'm within the industry. So the cross-contamination between the two chicken, gas stun and electric stun chicken in facilities is huge. People misadvertising it, claiming that they got chicken from a specific place, but they're buying from other places. Mixing of chicken, in facilities before it comes to your butcher, to your restaurant and so forth, this is where it becomes quite difficult. Unfortunately, it's not an issue that we're going to be able to fix overnight. It's quite a large and substantial issue, but it's time that we put a stop to it and make a change now before it just gets worse.
So when we're speaking about halal and the problems that we're facing here in Australia, the reason why all of these problems actually exist is because the halal market is not regulated. There's absolutely no law that protects you as a consumer that says that if someone comes out and advertises specific product as halal, but it's not, that they will then be charged for it, which is false advertising. We've contacted the ACCC multiple times. They say it's way beyond our reach. We cannot do anything like this. The export halal market is regulated by the Australian government. The best type of meat that you can get is export meat, which is the halal certified export meat. But unfortunately, no other country wants to buy chickens from Australia. They only want to buy red meat from Australia. So you can't really find export chicken. You can probably find export red meat on the market, and that's probably the best that you can get. But in terms of the local halal market, there's no regulation. So each man to himself. I can turn around right now off the back of this lesson, go upstairs, go to that website, make a new website, call it Ibrahim's Halal Butcher, right? And I'm going to go into advertise whatever I like in there as halal. I don't need to sell anything halal, and I'm allowed to do that, right? I can do that. I'll get off scotch-free, and it's currently happening. We know people who are doing this, right? And so this adds more complexity to the matter. Those who then claim, like, the main, slaughterhouses that actually use cast-tanning is Bayara and Ingham's, and what was the other one? No. We're talking about cast-tanning. So the ones who use gas-tanning here, and Bayara and Ingham's, right? Stay away from them, right? Cordina uses water bath tanning. Now, someone who hears about this issue, and he has a Muslim population, right? And we know someone who does this. He turns around and he says, I get my chicken from Cordina, but he's a liar. He gets his chicken from Bayara, right? And this guy's not a Muslim.
Mix and match.
He'll tell you, what, I'll get Cordina, I'll get one batch once a month, but every other week I'll get it from Bayara. Because logistically it's heaps easier. And so what they say is, I get it from Cordina. How do you know, right? And so it adds complexity to the matter. Now, I'm not saying that, you're going to be able now to come out of this lesson and, I know what exactly to do. It's going to be very difficult. It's very challenging, very hard for us to navigate this matter. And I've been like this for the last 2 years or a bit more, right? The Australian National Imams Council came out with a position statement on this matter. And they said that because of the doubt in this, then everyone must refrain from eating any gas-stunned chicken until the report is complete. That report is coming out very shortly, inshallah, that the Australian National Imams Council has been working on. And that report, it's been in the making for about 2 years. Again, Najee was saying that it was delayed because of COVID. We didn't have access to slaughterhouses and get inside and whatnot. But alhamdulillah, we're reaching the end. And this is the part now where it's about more of awareness, which is why we're speaking about it today. We just want to raise that awareness.
So inshallah, the whole point of the report is to not only bring awareness, is also to finally put the doubts out. So what we want to do, the whole purpose of it was to actually get the proper evidence, the facts in relation to the specific method of cast-tanning, presented to the Fatwa Council for them to overlook it with professional advice from specific people within the medical field and the field that's necessary, to be able to make a rational decision Islamically on whether that method is actually capable of being consumed. In terms of suppliers and so forth, I'm not here to speak to you about which one's good and which one's not and so forth. Inshallah, that with some research you'll be able to figure that out for yourself, inshallah. There is poultry out there which is fine to be consumed. You just need to look, and I'm happy to discuss it with people if they want to ask the questions, inshallah, later on in relation to where you can buy it from. I prefer to try to buy it directly from specific places. That way I know what I'm getting. And some of it might need a little bit more labor. Some of it might need that you buy it in the whole bird package, in a specific package, and you cut it up at home and so forth, for the time being, until we fix the issue. In terms of halal certification in general in Australia, like Sheikh was saying, it's unregulated. So any restaurant, even though it is illegal to misadvertise something intentionally. If you know you have a restaurant that's selling non-halal food but you're claiming it's halal, it's illegal. But what can really be done about it? There's too much of them around to be able for the ACCC or anyone to be able to take action in relation to it. So when you go to a restaurant, cafe, Muslim, non-Muslim alike, you need to look for your certification. Look for proof of halal. Many people are labeling the word halal. They print off a piece of paper, A4, stick it on their front and say that they're halal. But 3/4 of the stuff in their shop is non-halal. There's contamination between pork and non-pork. They're cooking pork on the same plates. You know, it's unfortunately not good enough for us to go in and say, okay, look, the person tells me, oh, my meat's halal or my chicken's halal, but they sell pork there. Because on that hot plate in the back, they're cooking on the same hot plate, cooking in the same oil, frying in the same oil. You know, we were discussing this recently on the weekend where a fish and chip shop, they sell fish and chips, but they also sell a product that they fry in the same fryer as the fish and chips. But you automatically think, oh, that fish and chips is halal. Yes, it is. But now that oil is contaminated. So these are the issues we need to be aware of when we're buying our food for consumption.
When approaching the halal chicken issue, I mean, how should you approach it? With family, with going to restaurants, whatever it is, right? When I first started, looking into this matter, I was adamant. I wanted to know, right? And again, it really brought out some very uncomfortable conversations. So here I'm going to give you some tips on what one should do and how to navigate this matter as you live, because you're still going to need to eat. And someone's going to invite you over and tell you, wallah, come over for a barbecue, right? Or you're going to go to a restaurant and you don't know whether this restaurant actually has, chicken that's stunned with gas or not. And so the way I approach it when it comes to businesses, you can ask, no problem. Why? Because you're paying, right? So you can always ask, no issues. When you go to a slaughter, when you go to a butcher, when you go to a restaurant, whatever it is, a cafe, always ask, where do you get your chicken from? Okay. What's required by you is to ask if this person is a Muslim and they are upright and you know they are upright Muslims, then you have to take their word for it. But if you know that this Muslim or non-Muslim, right, for that matter, could be a bad person, then you can't just take their word for it. That's one. Two, I'll give you an example of a scenario that happened with me. I saw a brother opened up a new shop. He's a brother, and a Muslim brother, bead, everything, And I wanted to go and support him. And so I wanted to go and buy one of his burgers. And so I went to the shop and I asked him, look, can I get this burger and that burger and whatever it is? He's one of the boys. And then it occurred to me, I didn't ask him. So, sorry, where do you get your chicken from? I've already made the order. I go, where do you get your chicken from? I get it from Bayara. I go, are you serious, man? Why do you get it from Bayara? He knew exactly what I was talking about. He goes, look, man, just started to worm around, right? It's not my industry. I said, Habibi, you are in the industry. You are selling chicken to those who come and consume it. And so what did I tell him? I said, look, brother, I'm not going to eat. He goes, I can give you the meat burger. I said, do you use the same hot plate? He says to me, yes. I go, sorry, brother, I'm not going to eat. I love the brother. He's one of the boys. But if I don't put that pressure, we're not going to have this conversation. We're not going to have this conversation. We have to put that pressure. So that way people turn and get the chicken from the right place, right? And that's your job. I can't do it alone. That's when you go into a restaurant. You want to add something?
Yeah, just to touch on that, inshallah. So, last thing we want is people to go out to restaurants and cafes and start abusing the restaurants and cafes.
Don't abuse.
That's not what we want. What's happening is that, unfortunately, a lot of the restaurants and cafes, they don't know. Some of them don't know. Some of them, their hands are tied. The system itself, from start to beginning, the line all the way down from start to beginning, is a difficult situation. So
Speak about the logistics and why it's difficult.
the logistics is what's difficult. So even someone like some of the brand names that Sheikh was discussing, not all of them use only cast iron. Some of them actually have electric water start facilities plus cast iron facilities. The issue is there's no guarantee of which facility your actual chicken of that brand is coming from. A lot of times they go from different abattoirs to their distribution centers, to middlemen, other distribution centers, and that's where the mixing happens, and that's where you don't know, you can't guarantee what chicken you're getting out of that. It could be coming from that facility or the other facility that is the same brand. This is where the contentious issue is. This is where the problem is. So the abattoir, you might have an abattoir here which is fine. It gets sold to a wholesaler, and then the wholesaler is buying from this one, because obviously he can't buy from one because there's competition, plus there's enough stock that he needs. He goes to one, and then they distribute to restaurants, cafes, and so forth. And this is where the problem, the breakdown happens in the system, the distribution. And a lot of these facilities you can't buy directly from. There is one or two small ones you can buy directly from, but in general, it's not guaranteed that that's what's reaching your restaurant or your cafe. Like I said, most cafes, restaurants, butchers, their hands are tied. So they're not capable of making that specific change because they can't get enough supply, or they can't get enough supply from the right people. And this is the situation we currently have. And a lot of them don't know in general. So
Well, that's why we have to start the conversation, right? And wherever we go, we need to speak about this. The other part to it is, which is also very uncomfortable, is when you go to someone's house and someone's inviting you over and whatever it is, right? Make it clear, make it known that, look, I have specific requirements in regards to my chicken, if they're ever inviting you over. And just say, look, please, if you can just get your chicken from this place or from that place, right? That's okay to say that, so long as you know the person you are speaking to is not going to take offense to it, right? But if they're going to take offense to it, and it's going to start bringing about animosity in the hearts, and they're going to start blowing up in your face and whatever it is, then just politely become a vegetarian. Right? I've done this a couple of times myself, right? I rock up to someone's house, whatever. Look, I don't want to have that conversation, right? I know it's going to be a difficult one in that moment. And so what I do, where's the tabbouleh? I just get the tabbouleh. I eat that, right? That's enough for me. So those who, again, one of the levels of halal that we spoke about in regards to what Imam al-Ghazali mentions, is when we have overwhelming doubt that about 90% of the chicken that's supplied in Australia is through this castaning process, and that most of the chicken that's circulated in Australia is of that type, and there's a huge doubt on it, and the report's going to come out soon that's going to settle it very quickly, then most of the chicken, well, there's a doubt to it, right? And so unless I can verify where it's coming from, I shouldn't be eating. Imam al-Ghazali, he brings out one example, and this is one I want to end off before I give it to Najib to make his last remarks. He says that if you find someone who is a pious person, and you know because he's a pious person, an upright person, that he's not going to give you something that's haram, but you also know what they're presenting to you, which is what they're holding in their hand, is extremely rare for it to be halal, then now you are in doubt. You've got a pious person, religious, could be abided, whatever it is, but whatever they're presenting to you could be haram. What do you do? Imam al-Ghazali says here that because the overwhelming doubt is that this product is haram, then we must stay away from it. And you politely reject. You politely turn it down. Jazakallah khairan. I don't eat chicken. That could be one of them. I had a event recently, and I forgot to ask about that event, right? I forgot to ask about the chicken, where they're getting it from, whatever it is. So I didn't eat chicken. All right, it's happened to me multiple times. One time I was at a dinner somewhere. I think it was a fundraising dinner or something. Then I asked the chef inside the back, look, can you tell me where you get the chicken from? He told me I get it from this place. I quickly jumped online. Where is it from? Where do they get their supplies from? No halal. I didn't eat. Okay, so it's out there, right? It's out there. So just be cautious, be understanding, and also don't be intrusive either. Right? So just like what Naji said, we're not out there to make businesses' lives harder. It's already hard as it is for them to get halal chicken. Right? But we don't want to sit there and start screaming at them and blaming them, but just open up the conversation, bring it to light if they don't know. And you yourself as well, do some more research, inshallah, for yourself, for your family. At the end of the day, halal consumption is a huge part of our deen. The default position is what you consume is haram until proven otherwise. That's the default position. And so one needs to be very cautious when eating halal if we want our dua to be accepted, if we want our actions to have a very solid foundation, as Imam al-Ghazali mentions. I leave the final remarks inshallah for Brother Naji.
I know this is going to affect a lot of people's post-gym workout protein and the kids' nuggets and so forth. It's been a very hard discussion. Over the last, how long it's been, we've been working on it. Unfortunately, it's become now our responsibility for us to speak out in relation to it, because once we know, we must advise and obviously clarify, hence the situation. So, as Sheikh was saying, please don't go out and start abusing family and friends and restaurants and cafes and so forth. Make a conscious effort to do research yourself, check, ask questions, and put pressure on these larger companies. Call them and ask them. Call the larger companies, ask them, do you use this method or this method? Yep, we use this method. Okay, well, we don't eat it. The more people that make the phone call, the more people that speak out and talk, the larger the pressure is on those companies to make that change and come to the table and discuss it. We want them to come to the table and discuss it and find alternative ways to be able to fix it. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But inshallah, with everyone's effort, it'll get better inshallah.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Tafadhal, Haj.
I just want to find out that you get this lot of organization is selling the halal certificate without looking at them. Instead of we going to ask them the thing that you raised this chicken from, the organization beating each other to sell the certificate. So where they coming? Where their responsibility?
Well, yeah, that's right. No, that's right. That's right. Look, there are some dodgy people out there. There's no doubt about that. There are some companies out there who do a very good job, but there are also some dodgy people out there. Again, it's not a regulated market. There's not much that we can do about it. Unfortunately, it's been the case for like 20 years or something. Inshallah, we hope that, with the work that we're doing, that we can actually bring a change in regards to that specific matter. Certification companies not doing their job, and then also selling certifications as opposed to actually doing audits. Then you have companies using third-party certifications. They don't actually have a certification themselves, but they get a certification from who their supplier is, and then they say that they're certified, but they're not. So there's a lot of issues in regards to certification. You're right. However, it's like we said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle. Any other questions? Yes.
About the false advertising, is the same thing with the juice, with the kosher food, or are they allowed to say it's kosher but it's not kosher?
Look, I don't like to discuss that too much, but they're a lot more strict than what we are as a community in general. The community support that they have in comparison to what we have is substantially different. Hence, when they see some false advertising, they put a lot more pressure on it in terms of government, federal, but the community itself, the actual community itself, puts a lot more pressure than what we do in general. So,
can you explain what's so detrimental about the gas stunning method?
The detrimental part is actually the chicken itself. The whole point of the report is to find out if the actual chicken is dead before the slaughter, and if it's dead, how's it dying? Is it dying through suffocation? And how's it dying before it's getting slaughtered? And that's the biggest contentious issue in relation to gas stunning.
So that's what we're working on right now in regards to that report. But what we already know, and what the companies have already agreed with, is that through gas stunning, the process is not reversible. What that means is that when you get a chicken or poultry that goes through these gas chambers, if you take them out of the gas chamber, you don't let them go to the blade they're not going to come back to life, right? They're not going to start flapping their wings and they're dead, right? Whereas in comparison to electric stunning, after 45 seconds, 50 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it is, take the chicken off the belt, give it some time, it's going to start flapping its wings, it's going to start running around, it's going to start, so it's alive. Whereas gas stunning, there's no doubt whatsoever that the process is non-reversible. So that's already one thing that we know. But in regards to it being dead or not before the blade, that's what the report is actually getting. That's conclusive evidence.
The other thing in relation to that as well, all these trials and tests, they've actually been done overseas before, by Islamic bodies overseas, by countries overseas. So there's proof of it. You just have to read. You have to check online and read England, Germany, and so forth. All these tests have already been done. But we want evidence here in Australia. Another thing you can do, if you have a look on YouTube and check gas stunning method and electric water bath stunning, you'll see the difference. You'll be able to observe the reaction of the bird, and you'll see instantly the difference between the two. And if you do a bit of reading, you'll automatically be able to find the information that you need if one looks.
I think, not you, Malik, I'll take the brother behind you, then I'll go to you. Yeah. I'm going to start.
Mother here explained that the logistics is that the supplier sends to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler distributes to regular sellers. If we know that the wholesalers are cross-contaminating, even if the supplier is halal, shouldn't we just completely avoid everything?
Yeah, okay, very good. So Imam al-Ghazali actually brings out one of those, he actually uses this example. He says, if you are in doubt because of some animals that were slaughtered and some animals that were not slaughtered, and they were mixed together, and you don't know which one's which, can you eat from them? He says that the ulama, by consensus, ijma', say you must refrain from eating from this poultry or from this food.
So then how can you say that these, like when I'm eating, I go and I check if it's halal on my phone and then I go eat? Shouldn't you just completely stop?
Not necessarily, no, because not everyone gets from a warehouse or a distributor. They'll get sometimes from a supplier. Am I correct?
In this scenario, very hard for them to get it directly from a supplier, unless they're buying in large quantities. But look, the safest is probably if you're buying it for the house, for example, you can actually buy specific ones that are got like whole birds that are got a specific wrapping on it. You know where that's coming from, and you process it at home for raw chicken. Or there is, I'll discuss it inshallah off camera. In relation to some suppliers, because I don't want to make a commercial thing, and some suppliers that you can buy directly from their factory as well. It's half an hour, 40-minute probably drive from here, but that's where I go. I drive for half an hour, 40 minutes. I'll mention it, it's called Dina. I drive to their factory directly and I buy from there. I'll buy 13, 14, 15 kilos and put it in the freezer, and we're done, you know what I mean? So there is ways, but you just have to go out and drive to get it. Restaurants is a lot more difficult and harder, of course. That's something that you have to look into.
Every restaurant is different, of course, yeah. Malik, do you have a question?
How do you approach red meats?
Oh, that's a whole different can of worms, that one. We haven't opened it yet.
I haven't opened the red meats can yet. That's another issue.
You ask them. Like I went once to a restaurant, I was out in Wupperland, right? I was the first customer in the restaurant. I told, did you have bacon? Just me, yes. Can you do me a favor, please? Since I'm the first customer, can you make sure you just wash the pan? And when you make my eggs, I'm the first one that you make it for. She goes, no problem. All right? And I can see it, she's doing it right there, right in front of me. And so we accepted that, khalas, we ate it, right? When you're out in Wupperland. But look, it's not always that easy, right? I was the first customer, it's not that easy, right? But look, when there's cross-contamination, just stay away. Just stay away.
Is that what you're referring to, red meat, cross-contamination, you mean, between at the restaurant? Red meat's another option. Red meat, there's a lot of alternatives to be able to buy halal. Like it's nowhere near as bad as poultry. The issues happen with specific distribution networks and so forth, but that's another thing we're looking into at the moment, but it's nowhere near as bad as poultry.
Especially because with red meat we've got the export market, and that's regulated by Australia. And so because it's regulated, there's a very strict standards that must be met by, standards by Malaysia, by Singapore, by Indonesia, by Turkey, by others, right? Saudi Arabia. Very strict standards that these companies must meet for those companies to accept the export, right? And so that's why it's a lot more, it's a market that's less troublesome as a chicken. Any other questions? Yes, Tfadal. Right, so hand slaughter versus machine slaughter. There's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars on the permissibility of that. There's conditions that must be met for those who say that machine slaughter is permissible, right? There's also some scholars who say that machine slaughter you can't eat from it, you have to eat from hand slaughter. By far, hand slaughter is probably a lot more superior in regards to its application, because there's a person there who's slaughtering the whole time and everything like that. But in saying that, there is a fatwa, a very clear one, right, that machine slaughter is accepted, right? And so therefore, that's just a matter of a difference of opinion, right, where there's difference of opinion within the scholars. But the pre-gas stunning, if the animal is dead, right, this is a very different topic. It's a very different topic.
The contentious issue with, I think, the hand slaughter is that I believe some of the Mashaykh had spoken about is that people believe that machine slaughter, people were putting like a tape recorder that says Bismillah Allahu Akbar, and that's it, there's no one there. But majority of the machine slaughtered facilities here in Australia that I've been to or seen, there's Muslim slaughtermen there. There's a Muslim saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar on every bird that goes past, because it's a slow process. So he touches it, say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, it goes into the machine, gets slaughtered, it comes out the other side, it gets checked by a checker to make sure the cut was right, and it continues through. So the contentious issue that wasn't being followed is what people who want hand slaughtered say that's the issue. But like I said, Sheikh said, difference of opinion.
I'd like to open it up for the sisters. If there's any questions from the sisters, you can just ask, inshallah, go ahead, and we'll do our best to answer. Any questions from the sisters before we come back to the brothers? Okay, any questions, brothers? I'm going to take from this side and come back to you, inshallah. Fadal.
Why is it when you're hunting and you shoot the animal or arrow it and it flies, you still have to slaughter it, but when it comes to the gassing, you're not allowed to?
Very good question. Why is it that when it comes to hunting, you can shoot the animal, even if it dies, you can then slaughter and eat it, but when it comes to like gassing or anything like that, you can't? That's the question, right? I asked the same question. And that's because that's the only exception which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ allowed, right? With hunting. It's impossible for you to hunt an animal and always guarantee that it's not going to die with your arrow, right? That's the only exception. Whereas animals that are cultivated, they're grown, in your farm, no, you've got the access to their neck, right? And so that's very different when it comes to wild animals. So the scenario here that I was talking about in regards to shooting only applies to wild animals. If you go do it to a chicken in your backyard and you put an arrow into the chicken in your backyard and you get to it, say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, but it's dead, no, you can't eat it. It's only to wild animals, right? وَيَكُمْ. Yes, Fadal.
You mentioned about the blood is gushing.
Yeah.
What's the science behind that?
I don't know the science behind it, I haven't looked into it, but this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. I'm sure that there are some science papers that could explain, some wisdoms behind it, but at the end of the day, it's revelation from Allah, so we accept it as is. I remember once I was watching Bear Grylls, right, when I was younger, and I saw him, slaughter an animal, and then he started to drink the blood of the gushing animal, right? I thought to myself, wow, that's very gruesome, right? And I thought to myself, okay, in a survival situation, whatever it is, what would you do? All right, no problem. Even Islamically speaking, in a survival situation, these rulings are lifted. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that it's impermissible to eat that blood that is gushing. As for the wisdom behind it, I don't know. The science behind it, I don't know. But it's revelation, and we accept. Does that make sense? So we drain the blood that's coming out, and then any blood that's left within the body, that's permissible to eat if there's like remains of blood. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, تفضل. What is red meat? Red meat is everything that's regarded like beef, like cows. Yeah, that's like what we regard as red meat, something like that.
So your kifta, your meat,
Your steak,
your
lamb chops, your
before you cook it when it's red, that's red meat.
that's red meat. Okay, come back to you. Tafadhal.
What about like when you're shopping at Woolies and you're like, is Fatali halal?
You have to ask for Taylor.
Go ask for Taylor.
If it's available, like if it's halal certified and it's available.
Woolies, you know, the chicken,
Martadella.
mozzarella, chicken mozzarella.
What the Fatali one? You mean?
Have you looked into it? I don't know.
No, I'm not sure. You need to speak to it and find where the supplier is. Yeah.
I actually haven't looked into it either. Yes.
Just with the halal certification, there's so many. Which ones do you endorse?
Well, the one that we endorse is
Oh.
the Australian National Imams Council. That's one, but it's not the only one. Right? There are other certifications that do good. There are some certifications that you know are dodgy. Right? Just jump on their website. They've got nothing on their website. Right? You call someone, no one answers. You email them, no one replies. Like the indications that these people are dodgy. So stay away from them. I'm not out here to tell you, well, this certification is good, this certification is not. But the one that we work with is Australian National Imams Council, and we've got Anik Halal, and he's the manager. Throwing him under the bus.
Well, there's good and bad in anyone. You know what I mean? We're at the same time we're human. Like mistakes can happen, but in general, you jump online. You'll see some like larger ones. There's actually a government website which shows the ones that are approved for export. They're usually the larger ones that are more, how do I say, a bit more favoured. But there is a lot of smaller ones who you just got to be careful of.
All right, we're going to have to end it here, inshallah, because it is Isha time. Jazakumullah khairan. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us all in these difficult and challenging times. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who only consume what is halal. Jazakumullah khairan for coming today. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.